My name is Elise, and I'm 29 years old. I'll never forget the day my mother laughed and said, "You'll never have a house like your sister's." It landed like a verdict, already signed, sealed, and framed on the wall of our family room. And my dad just nodded along, as if this future had been decided years ago, without me even being present. Meanwhile, my sister leaned back in her chair, that half smile on her face she always wore whenever she won something she hadn't earned. She teased, "You're jealous, aren't you?" A line that stuck with me because it was easier for them to believe envy than effort. Easier to see me as the supporting character in my own life than the author of my story. I didn't argue, not because I agreed, but because I'd learned that defending my dreams in that house only fed the laughter. And that laughter? It had teeth. My sister's place was the family trophy. A wide, bright home with a manicured lawn, the kind of house that looked great in photos and even better in conversations. The kind of house my parents mentioned to neighbors before they ever asked how I was doing. At dinners, my mom would bring it up casually. New cabinets, the view, the neighborhood, while my dad nodded again, proud in a way that made it clear pride had a limited supply. When I tried to share anything about my life, the room would tilt back toward her, as if gravity itself favored her success. I worked long hours, saved quietly, and learned to keep my plans folded inside me like a map I wouldn't open until I reached the border. Every paycheck went into a future no one else could see, and every late night taught me patience. The truth was, I didn't want a house like my sister's. I wanted one that fit me, one built on choices I made when no one was watching. But explaining that felt pointless when the narrative had already been written for me. So, I smiled when my sister teased me, swallowed my reply when my dad nodded, and watched my mother's laughter ripple through the room like permission for everyone else to dismiss me. There were moments I almost believed them. Moments when doubt crept in during the quiet hours, asking if maybe they were right. If maybe wanting more without their approval was a kind of arrogance. But then I'd remember the mornings I left before sunrise, the weekends I turned down invitations, the spreadsheets that tracked every dollar with the seriousness of a vow, and the small thrill of knowing that progress doesn't always announce itself. I kept going. Months passed, then years, and the comments didn't stop. They softened sometimes, sharpened others, but they were always there, a chorus that tried to set my limits. When my sister upgraded her kitchen, my mother called to tell me, as if it were breaking news, as if I'd been waiting by the phone for proof that I was behind. When I mentioned I was busy with a project, my dad asked if it was another one of those phases. And my sister laughed again, light and careless, the kind of laugh that assumes the ending. I learned to answer with neutrality, give them nothing they could twist, and keep my milestones private. I didn't tell them about the promotion, the bonus, or the long conversations with lenders who looked at me like I was serious because I was. I didn't tell them about the neighborhoods I walked through after work, imagining mornings and keys and silence that belonged to me. I didn't tell them about the fear either, the very real fear that maybe the laughter would be right. But fear, like savings, grows smaller the more you face it. The night it all came to a head started like any other family gathering, with compliments aimed elsewhere and jokes that landed on me. And when my sister tossed out, "You're jealous, aren't you?" Again, my mother laughed first. My dad nodded, and I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. I invited my sister over for tea, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. She accepted with a smirk, probably imagining another chance to compare, another room where she'd stand taller by default. I said nothing else. I didn't defend myself, didn't promise anything, didn't hint at what was coming because I'd learned that some truths are better revealed than argued. When she arrived, she called hysterically, "Hey Mom, you have to see this right now." And even before the words finished echoing, I knew the laughter had reached its last rehearsal. Because for the first time, the story wasn't about what they thought I couldn't have, but about what I had already built without their applause. My sister's hysterical voice rang out, "Hey Mom, you have to see this right now." I stood there quietly, holding 2 cups of tea, listening to her voice bounce off the walls of the house they all said I'd never have. And for a brief, Electric moment. I felt time fold in on itself. Every laugh, every nod, every, "You'll never have a house like your sister's," lining up to witness what none of them had bothered to imagine. My sister kept walking, slow at first, then faster, opening doors, touching surfaces, peering out windows as if the place might vanish if she blinked too long. I could almost hear her thoughts scrambling to rewrite the story she'd rehearsed for years. When my parents arrived, my mother's smile froze halfway. The same mouth that had laughed was now unsure what shape to take. My dad, who had always nodded along, stood silent, his head finally still. My sister tried to recover, tried to laugh it off. But the words came out thin because the truth was heavy in the air, and it didn't care about her tone. I watched them absorb it. The open living room, the light I'd chosen, the quiet confidence of a space designed without their approval. And I realized that success isn't loud when it's real. It just stands there and waits for everyone else to catch up. My mother cleared her throat and said something about taste, about how nice it was. And I heard the echo of all the times she'd said nice things about my sister's house as if it were a medal pinned to her chest, while mine had been dismissed as a fantasy. My dad finally spoke, asking how I managed it. And the question felt almost strange after years of assumptions because the answer had always been there, unglamorous and unshared. Work, patience, discipline, and the refusal to let laughter decide my limits. My sister circled back to the kitchen and said softly, "I didn't know you were doing this." And I thought about how often people mistake silence for stagnation, how often they confuse privacy with failure. I poured the tea, set the cups down, and the ordinary clink sounded louder than applause. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I let them sit with it. The fact that, while they were busy comparing houses, I was building one. While they were busy laughing, I was saving. While they were busy nodding, I was learning. My mother finally said, almost to herself, "I guess we were wrong." And it wasn't an apology, not really, but it was a crack in the old script. And sometimes, that's where light gets in. My sister looked at me then, truly looked, without the tease, without the smirk, and said, "It's beautiful." And I believed her. Not because the words mattered, but because the power had shifted back where it belonged. I didn't gloat, didn't replay their lines back at them, though they hovered there. "You'll never have a house like your sister's. You're jealous, aren't you?" Ghosts of a story that no longer fit the room. I understood something in that moment that I wish I'd known earlier. The best response to doubt isn't an argument. It's evidence. As they left, my dad paused at the door, nodded once more, but this time it wasn't agreement with someone else's judgment. It was recognition, and that difference felt like closure. After the door closed, I walked through my house alone, touching the walls, breathing in the quiet, letting the weight of it settle in a good way. The way earned things do. I thought about how many people listening to this have been laughed at, underestimated, told their dreams were unrealistic by the very people who were supposed to believe first. And I want you to hear this clearly. Their laughter is not a prophecy, and their nods are not the final word. Sometimes, the story only changes when you stop narrating it for them and start living it for yourself. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been told you'll never have something you're quietly working toward, then stay with me, because there are more stories like this. Stories about patience, proof, and turning doubt into doors. Subscribe to the channel now, so you don't miss the next one. And remember, the most powerful chapters are often written when no one is watching.